The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists. Theo Goodman from Transmission Rocks.
Hello, Internet.
Blake Anderson from Facebook.com/GotBlake.
Hello, Internet. I'm very excited to be online.
Will Pangman from Satoshi Social.
Welcome.
Derrick J. Freeman from Free Talk Live. And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue number 1 as my computer totally freezes. Come on. Issue 1. Bitcoin's war could threaten its survival. The Bitcoin block size debate hit the mainstream media this week with CNBC weighing in on the conflict that could tear Bitcoin to shreds. The block size debate. On one side is Jeff Garzik, Bitcoin core developer, who says that we must raise the block size to allow for more transactions and a faster Bitcoin network. On the other side are the miners who say they don't want the block size raised, as they'd have to do more work for the same reward. Blake Anderson, bigger blocks?
Well, this is a good question. I mean, as an eventuality, I mean, we're going to have block sizes that enable more than 7 transactions per second. I mean, I think that that's pretty much incontrovertible if Bitcoin's going to continue to grow in the way that people expect for it to. I think a good example to use is right now, Bitcoin's kind of like in first gear with that block size, and it works really well that way. The car is not moving at full speed, and if we shift the car irreversibly into 5th gear while it's at low speed, that could have some negative impact. And I know this is not a good technical description of what's going on here, but that's kind of the nature of this debate. A lot of people are saying, you know, if we keep the block sizes smaller, that's more robustness, that's more security per transaction. There's some things infrastructurally that are desirable in keeping the block size small. But if the block size is too small and there's too many transactions and it creates a backlog and we don't have a way of dealing with that, that's not good either. So I think that the worst thing that we could do is make a snap judgment and then change to a different block size without everybody being on board and creating a fractured environment. But at the same time, people are acting like this is a really, really, really huge problem. And it's not a really small problem, but the technology that Bitcoin exists on already is here. And I think that we should be able to take some comfort in the fact that even if something goes really wrong, it will either be repairable, or we can start a new blockchain, or it could be a fork. This isn't something that is going to completely kill, you know, Bitcoin in a way that like nobody ever thought was going to happen before. I mean, I just want to try to avoid people away from that opinion.
You totally lost me with the stuff about the car. Blockchain, engine block, I'm not sure. Theo Goodman.
I like Jeff Garzik's proposal, and I agree with Blake that we should not go with a snap decision. Let's think about this. I think the media and the members of public are going to have a little bit of a difficult time kind of grasping what's going on. This is not like a top-down company and other things they're used to, where how the decisions are made. You know, it's kind of like a weird family, I guess. There's not really a way to describe it. You know, it's kind of like a family, but we don't all know each other. So, but we're connected through the blockchain. That's how I would kind of describe it. So, you know, we're going to have some nice headlines like this, and I do not think the so-called war, will break Bitcoin. In fact, this whole discussion is going to make everything stronger in the whole discussion. I mean, just think about all the stuff you learned about block size since this became a hot topic. You know, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of people, more people getting involved, non-technical people trying to figure out what this is, what's on the table, etc. So I think the discussion is really important, but let's not make a snap decision.
You're right, Theo. Bitcoin's a family, much like the gathering of the Juggalos is a family. Don't know what a Juggalo is? Look it up. Will Pangman.
So yeah, obviously most people agree the block size does need to be increased, and I do like Jeff Garzik's proposal. the other guys are right. There are economic consequences to what's being proposed and all the levels of the proposals that are out there. And I like to think that, I mean, you know, I like to think that the core developer community, which includes Gavin and Mike Hearn, I would argue, also, who are being more radical in their approach to these changes, and Jeff Garzik trying to kind of play the middle, and then you have who a lot of people suspect are Satoshi Nakamoto, which is Dr. Adam Back, Dr. Peter Willey, and Dr. Vladimir as well. And these three guys, who all work for Blockstream, by the way, are very much more conservative in their approach. And I guess I should take that back. I'm not sure Dr. Willey and Dr. Vladimir work for Blockstream. I believe they do, but I'm not sure. But certainly Dr. Back does. But anyway, they're asking for more debate on like how these changes should be implemented in the future, and less debate on how extreme the block size increase should be. Should there be all the parameters of the block size debate itself, right? And I think that is the actual debate: is how do protocol level changes in Bitcoin, that impact the entire network, get implemented going forward. It's not a matter of how much should we increase the block size. That's the real debate, and I think Gavin and Mike Hearn, I'm not sure if they mean to do this, but they certainly are with their radical approach and their heavy-handedness. Mike Hearn has been very ham-fisted in the past with a commit to the Bitcoin core that temporarily kind of broke Bitcoin, forked Bitcoin and caused people to lose money. So, and that was fixed pretty quickly. I mean, this is how anti-fragile Bitcoin works, but that's the point. It's not so much about the blockchain, the block size. It's more about how these changes get implemented, and that's really where the debate should be. And there should be a lot more computer science in that debate, and less economic theory and all these other things in that debate, in my opinion, because that's where you get the sensationalism, the alarmism. Anytime I see alarmism in on a contentious issue, that is a dead giveaway of really, I don't know, just not the right answer, I guess, just to be nice. And
yeah, it brings emotion into it. A lot of emotion being brought
exactly.
into it.
So look out for the alarmism, stick close to like the computer science, and I think we can come to a good answer. And I think Jeff's on the right track. Jeff Garzik's on the right track. We'll eventually have an increase in the block size, no matter what happens. There will be no catastrophes. There will be no total wholesale breaking of Bitcoin, unless you see something like Bitcoin XT get shoved down everyone's throats, and then the miners have a war over which block, which fork of the chain to follow. That will be a big problem, and that's where the alarmism is taking us. So let's back off from that.
I did see a good article this morning on Reddit, Will, where they said, let's remember that the core developers are all computer scientists. Not one of them is an economist. So we might
not all of them are
advice here. This is a really complex situation.
That's a good point, but I should point out not all of them are computer scientists. Gavin and Mike are not computer scientists, although they've been very close with Bitcoin since practically day one. They both were very forthcoming with Satoshi. They both were, among the first people to contact Satoshi and take, and work on Bitcoin, volunteer. So their commitments, their contributions are not in question. But they're not around this computer science part of the debate, as much as they should be, and they're pushing too hard, in my opinion.
Well, and I would almost even argue that just a regular economist, like your everyday Paul Krugman, would actually be like, no, don't put them in. I would actually say that he would want to be an economist and a computer science and have your economic views be vetted as tenable through other logically motivated people. Because a lot of modern economists are like, yeah, but everything's relative and stuff, and I made a huge mistake about that, but it was the New York Times, so I'm going to go ahead and give a talk over here about some more stuff that's incorrect. So I just hope that we have, almost a polymathic ability of the people that we're going to talk to about this different stuff, instead of trying to compartmentalize all the information and then nobody can work as closely together as before. I think that Bitcoin's going to require a lot of people that know a lot of things working together, so hopefully we don't compartmentalize those knowledge sets too much and then have problems.
Blake may be right. Only a unicorn could solve our problems. Derrick J?
Yeah, so this story by CNBC really has me scratching my head about why didn't Satoshi foresee this and put it right into the code as he did with the difficulty. I mean, if the difficulty can be variable and sort of market-based, if you will, why shouldn't block size also be? I'd like to see a variable block size. And if that's something that someone could fork the blockchain, make a second Bitcoin, and improve on, I'm ready to jump ship. Why not? That sounds like it would have fewer problems down the road. That said, I'm looking for a market-based solution for this problem. And, oh, okay. Looks like Will's adding some commentary. Hopefully he'll be able to fill us in on what he knows there. But I don't see a need for this yet. I use Bitcoin every day, and I don't have transactions being too slow. I don't have the blockchain that I keep on my home computer taking up too much space. So I don't see the need for this yet. We're all looking sort of down the road and saying eventually this is going to be a problem, but why not let the market sort it out? If we customers are people who are upset with the block size, then we will demand a larger block size. And so the miners, they can throw a tizzy if they want, if they're upset about having to do more work for equal pay. But isn't that what we see with Uber and Lyft? These taxi companies complain about having to do more work for equal pay. Hey, well, sorry, that's innovation. That's the market at work. And it's going to make more customers happy. And it's going to drive the people who are doing the most efficient job at mining. It's going to keep them in business and push the rest of us out.
Moving on, exit question on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being squat, nothing, bupkis, and 10 being absolute metaphysical disaster and destruction on a global scale. How important is the Bitcoin block size debate? Blake Anderson.
Well, it's definitely a material factor as far as what's going on. So let's just say 5. I'll give a non-answer of 5.
Theo Goodman.
I'm going to go with 7.
Will Pangman.
4 or 5 is where I was leaning for the reasons I mentioned in my answer.
Derrick J.
Yeah, I say 10. This is absolutely catastrophic, just not right now. So it's important that we're having this discussion because this, as I said, could lead to me jumping ship from Bitcoin to something more sustainable.
The correct answer is 7. Moving on to issue 2. Will screen share load before my computer crashes completely? It's stalling, Issue 2. West Palm Beach men arrested in $1.8 million Bitcoin scheme. 2 men in Florida are accused of running an unlicensed money transmitting business. The men allegedly exchanged cash for people they knew to be engaging in criminal activity. Could this be where all the hacked and stolen Bitcoins are sold for cash? Story developing. Theo Goodman, your thoughts? Straight up money laundering, or another Bitcoin entrepreneur bites the dust?
Well, I haven't seen any proof of money laundering, so I can't say. I'm also not a lawyer, so just as a disclaimer. But definitely a Bitcoin entrepreneur biting the dust, because, as I understand, they didn't even try to get the right licenses. So a lot of the ones you'll ask, and they say, "Do you have money transmitter license, or do you have this or that?" Or like, "Well, we applied, we're getting it." But they didn't even try. I think they weren't even in the process, is what I understood. So, you could debate on if they should have to get one and all that. That, to me, that's another whole discussion that we're not going to get into, because that's a whole other show basically. But I don't know. I haven't seen any evidence to say this is where the locker money went, or this is where this criminal activity, where the money went. There also are definitely legitimate reasons to just do an over-the-counter trade for cash. Okay, so if it's criminal or not, I haven't seen enough evidence. If they were linked to whatever hacks or whatever of Bitcoin, but I just want to say, let's not demonize over-the-counter trading at and Bitcoin is peer-to-peer, so that is going to be including over-the-counter trading as the nature of Bitcoin.
Will Pangman.
So yeah, this is a very deep question here, deep issue, because it gets to the heart of a lot of things. You know, what is money laundering in the first place? You know, money laundering laws or restrictions are basically people who have authority telling other people who don't have the same authority how and when not, you know, when they can't use their own money. So, and this is supposed to stop the flow of proceeds from criminal activity. You know, that's the premise or the rationale in the first place for these laws. And it does look like, from the evidence that I've seen, that these guys were aiding and abetting, you know, by the letter of the law, the ransomware criminals and so on and so on and so on. So I just want to take this apart really quickly, because the most damning evidence has to do with this ransomware dealings that they were doing, right? It's kind of encouraging this ransomware. Well, I don't like when I hear that anyone I know or am encountering at all has to deal with ransomware. I mean, we used to have people come to the Milwaukee Bitcoin meetup and ask how to get Bitcoin because they had to deal with ransomware, and for a company or a person, you know, a home computer. And this is hard, and I hated seeing this, but the point of this is really, like, ransomware exploits weak systems, in information security, operational security. And it's what happens after ransomware is you overhaul your whole thing and you get it tight and you set up automated ways of highly securing your systems, and you actually then pay for the IT that you do need, and you don't skimp on it where maybe you did before. So again, there is a positive market consequence to ransomware companies, and these guys in encouraging this ransomware company is only, you know, I'm not advocating for ransomware whatsoever, but this is what we need to look at objectively about how markets work, right? There's a void or a flaw in the system, the market, and ransomware exploits it. Some guys thought up this software that exploits it to, you know, make a profit, and then after that it's patched. You know, so pretty much most of the time, you rarely hear of people getting hit twice by ransomware, and if they did, I mean, you know, fool you once, right? So the thing is, you know, money laundering aside, these guys were also setting up shell companies, and everything I read in this made me think, like, yeah, this sucks and this looks pretty shady and all this stuff, of course, but they were compelled into this by the rules as they are in place. These rules don't stop crime, right? They maybe allow for more criminals to be caught in some cases, but they also create new crimes, tons of new crimes that weren't in existence prior to the regulation, the law, the whatever. And that's important to point out. When you read through all this stuff, if you're that interested in this case, you'll see how they set up, the way they set up these shell companies, the way they named them, the way they use them, is all to navigate this, like, they just wanted to do business, clearly, right? And they didn't want to deal with too much of the hassle. And, you know, yeah, they committed crimes by the letter of the law in the process. So yeah, laws and regulations create crime. That's what they do.
Derrick J.
Do business? These people are criminals, Will. I mean, I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. Screw them. May they rot in hell. They had full knowledge of what was going on. Even though this is written from the mainstream perspective, I can tell that these guys were exploiting a system where they knew that people were victimizing others, and then they were saying, well, we'll wipe our hands of this, we'll create a little legal shield for ourselves, and they were sloppy doing it. I might even have some kudos to throw them if they actually did a good job shielding themselves from legal liability, but they didn't even do that. So the fact that they... another thing is, I could actually have their back if they were standing on moral principle, on moral ground, saying, look, yes, we don't get a license, and we're proud of that. You know, we don't think that people should have to ask permission to do business with others. But I've been in a position where I've been a clerk selling weapons, and I've had to make the difficult choice to say, look, I'm choosing not to do business with you, customer, because you seem like you're going to do harm with this. And that's in a difficult position for me to be in, but I think that's the business owner's responsibility, license or not. If you think that something wrong is going on, I mean, how do you not share responsibility in that? Yeah, screw these guys.
Yeah, my response is not, I don't sympathize with them. I don't agree with what they did. I was trying to just kind of share my experience of reading through the material that I've gotten so far, and it just makes me feel like, well, the only reason they're doing these things is because of the way these rules are. And because ransomware exists and they see like, oh, we can do a lot of business this way, we set up a trade channel with this customer, right? And like, why would, I just think more deeply about it. I was trying to get that in a soundbite, but like, why does ransomware exist? Why do money laundering laws, regulations exist? This kind of thing. I want people to be thinking about these things and why these holes in the marketplace and these demands for terrible services exist, right? Government creates these demands.
Well, humans just aren't very good at computer security yet. We haven't had very long to work on it, and there are a lot of holes like this where a script kiddie could come in and expose your security, and then, like Will said, you have to pay to fix it, and hopefully things get better. But as InfoSec Taylor Swift often reminds us, our computers are not ready for what we're about to do. She just had a field day going off on the Jeep that was recently hacked. They remotely stopped a Jeep with a computer. And yeah, even Christoph was like, I don't know if cars should have IP addresses yet. But it's another thing like the MP3 where we don't get to decide that whether we shouldn't have it. The technology decides, and the technology keeps moving forward. We will have computer-controlled cars, even though we aren't ready for it yet. Blake Anderson.
Well, I mean, this is actually kind of having to do with a discussion I was having with my wife the other night, wherein we have all these positive consequences of the new stuff that's coming, but then we have some negative consequences. One of the negative consequences of having this unregulated market is that people that are prone to scamming like to do so in the medium of Bitcoin because they can get away with it longer, etc. So we have all this technology coming through Bitcoin, and then we have, automatically admissible contracts and stuff that can do what it needs to do and blah, 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 and that's great. That's the positive aspect of this. The negative aspect of all of this is that security and technology are both going really fast, stumbling over one another. People aren't as secure as maybe they should be. We're all using new technology. So now take the brilliance and imagination that it would take to create these automatically admissible contracts and make a sophisticated trap out of that. That is going to be a massively, massively giant problem that I'm not sure how we're going to deal with in the future. We'll have to continually go through and try to fix this stuff. But the type of people that say that the ends justify the means, and I stole all these old people's bitcoins because they're better off, and they would have been, it would have been worse later, but then they starved to death and stuff. That's a Machiavellian, untenable argument. You can't go around saying that the ends justify the means and build libraries at gunpoint and stuff like that. It's nice to have a library, but that's you can't do that. So. Yeah, this business was obviously making ransomware. Ransomware really makes me mad. I've had to remove ransomware from friends' computers, families' computers, rescue their Bitcoin. Actually, some of them have fallen into the same ransomware twice. We can make judgments about how wise they are or not, but it has happened. So honestly, I try to PDOS ransomwares. I try to destroy their systems. They make me really, really, really mad. The risk there is that they're going to transfer through an intermediate and destroy that. So I try to be very careful, but I don't have any sympathy for these people. I think that they are, kind of scum of the earth ransomwarers that don't care who they have to hurt. They just want to, ends justify the means. We'll keep rationalizing this however we want, and I have no sympathy for them. That being said, the regulatory stuff that Will said is also tenable. When you make more and more and more and more laws, then you have a system of selective enforcement because you can do nothing else. You can't enforce all these laws. Let's put every single person who's ever smoked weed in jail. That's the dumbest thing ever. You wouldn't be able to do it. It would sink the country overnight. So when you have all these laws that enable selective enforcement of law, which is the cornerstone of tyranny, this is very, very quickly getting off into a bad way. So I can see it from Will's perspective. I can see it definitely from Derrick's perspective. But on a personal and emotional, visceral level, I hate these people and hope that they suffer the maximum consequences for what they did.
And Blake brings up a good point about Machiavelli. Remember that Machiavelli was most likely kidding. It was satire. He was not saying that it's a good thing to go out and have the ends justify the means. Much like Shakespeare said, if you want to ensure tyranny, the first thing you do is kill all the lawyers. People only listen to the second half of that quote, but the first half is the real key. Tyranny will be ensured if we can't be represented. Theo Goodman.
I think that I already commented about the Florida
we came full
guys.
circle.
Okay, what's the question? I'm sorry.
I think I didn't write an exit question, so we're just going to move on.
Let's
we talked
move
about it a
on.
lot.
We're moving on.
Here we go. Screen share activating. Will it work? Get 20% off anything on Amazon at purse.io. Thanks to Purse for letting me do the show. Please support our sponsors. This is like a legitimate support our sponsor type situation here. Issue 3, OpenBazaar to launch this November. Fresh off their $1 million investment from Andreessen Horowitz and Union Square Ventures, OpenBazaar plans to target unhappy eBay users, giving them the option to use the distributed eBay platform without fees. Theo Goodman, are we happy with this new investor-friendly open version of OpenBazaar, or could it be so much more?
I'm happy with it. I hope they launch soon. If they get money, they have more ability to program because they have more resources. So that's good. Let them get paid. Let them code this stuff. As far as I understand, it's going to be open source. So if I don't like it, I'll just fork it and make my Theo Bazaar or You're Really Bazaar or whatever other site I can make. I think that we're going to see a lot of these springing up as soon as people figure out this is the way to go. eBay is horrible. eBay is so ripe for disruption. I hate using that catchy word disruption, but it's crazy. Just look at that site. Just look at it. It's unbelievable. So
Would you just look at it? Or just look at it? Just look at it.
Yeah, I'm happy with OpenBazaar, and I think it's good that they got investment. Whatever they have to do, I don't know what the I don't know the investment contract or what the deal is, but they're working on open source software, so that's great.
Now Theo Bazaar, that would truly be bizarre. Will Pangman.
Yeah, I've been very excited about this project since I first saw it come into being in April of 2014 in Toronto. That was fantastic. It was under a different name back then. But yeah, the hackathon winner of the 2014 Toronto Bitcoin Conference was Amir Taki, who created Dark Market, which is what kind of birthed the idea of OpenBazaar, and other folks have taken it and run with it. They got $1 million from probably the biggest and baddest, maybe not the biggest, but probably the baddest VC firm in Silicon Valley, Andreessen Horowitz, doing some very cool things. And also on the East Coast, Union Square Ventures, very much a badass VC firm as well, doing lots of cool disruptive marketplaces all the time. And they're investors in Etsy for sure, and they're obviously very happy about that one. So yeah, I'm super excited for OpenBazaar to be launched. I have tons of ideas for people. I can't wait to start evangelizing OpenBazaar and giving ideas away for free for how people in their current lifestyle and daily routine can launch stores on OpenBazaar with just none of the headaches that are usually experienced with starting open commerce business, right? And giving people more access to micro entrepreneurship and working from home. And that working from home is great. Everyone wants to do it who can't do it or thinks they can't do it. They'll be with their families longer, more time, more quality time. It's all just good. So I've got tons of ideas to help people with OpenBazaar ideas, no matter where you are in the world or the country. I've got a list actually running. But yeah, this is great. This is a great project, and it's just it's going to be really cool to see it catch on. Let's try to get this some adoption quickly out the gates.
I was stoked to hear what you were going to say, because actually I heard about OpenBazaar from you. You were the person that told me about it and that it was cool, so I was hoping that you'd go a little bit more nuts than you did, but I guess you did a pretty good job of celebrating the awesome technology it represents.
Derrick J.
I am really excited about OpenBazaar. I've been following this for a long time, and the alternative markets that can serve people. I mean, I remember the days of BitMint, and we've been trying to do this online marketplace through Bitcoin thing for a while. And what I think is strange about this Cointelegraph article is that it refers to the donation as an investment, and I would call it a donation because I don't see how they're really going to make any money without charging fees. But if I were someone who was really rich and I saw the potential for Thomas to invent the wheel, but he had to spend some time to do that, I would say, here's some money, Thomas, because I think the innovations that are going to come from you inventing the wheel are going to serve humanity so greatly that I'm going to make my money back in a million other ways. So kudos to the people who have supported OpenBazaar. I think it's also really cool, just as a side note, that they named their company Obi-Wan. So, and it should be mentioned while we're having this discussion, sort of how it works. The innovation behind OpenBazaar is that markets or business people will serve their companies, for lack of a better term, on nodes, and so it'll be decentralized, much like Bitcoin itself. And so I just see this as an obvious next step for trade on the internet. Now that we have this technology, it's going to be used, and the people who are programming it need to be funded. So I'm just so excited. Can't wait to see it be unveiled.
And if you're impressed with the wheel, wait till you see Wheel 2.0. We're going to make it square. Blake Anderson.
I love square wheels, man. I put them on all my stuff, and then, eventually they get round again, and then you gotta take them off and put the square wheel back on. But it's always worth it when they're sharply square at the beginning. I love that. Well, no, I mean, the good points all around. I'm gonna try to get really macro on this. Everybody talked about the micro and the semantics. Let's get really macro. Let's economics is a study of human action. It sounds to me a lot like OpenBazaar is going to facilitate a shitload of human action really, really easily, really, really fast, really robustly, and that's good. Like, if we're going to try to take the subjectivity out of good and be like, what is good? Can we quantify good? That's some pretty good stuff. Like, I think it would be hard-pressed for somebody to come and bring controversy to the fact that that's good. It's incontrovertibly a good thing. OpenBazaar is going to be great, and just like Derrick said, if you're going to donate and invest into something, and it's something that's going to reduce friction in all of human action, I mean, please, do that. You owe that to yourself and everybody else to be like, maybe a couple of cents here and there to affect some positive change.
Moving on to issue number 4. Loading. Issue 4. Nasdaq reveals plan to upgrade existing financial system with the help of the blockchain. The love affair between Nasdaq and Bitcoin, the blockchain, has continued unabated since the powerful stock market firm made a deal with the Bitcoin infrastructure company Chain. The new Nasdaq stock market of the future, powered by blockchain, will be new, revolutionary, amazing, or just the same with a different back end. I ask you, Derrick J.
I have no idea how this is actually going to work. Have they explained it to anyone?
It's going to use Chain.
Well, what is Chain? I had never heard of
Chain is
them,
a company that provides blockchain infrastructure services. For a little while, they were doing a little plugin on IFTTT that let you tweet out how much money you received on a Bitcoin address. It was pretty cool. But this whole stock market thing sounds a lot more serious than a little IFTTT plugin.
Okay, so my initial reaction is it's really cool that a company called Chain exists and they serve the product that they've got. It sounds like if Nasdaq can actually use this and is confident enough to use it to have a major article written about them implementing this, then it's going to be helpful for many other companies as well. And I'm not crazy about Nasdaq, but I am crazy about markets, and so I'd like to see how I could possibly use this, or how maybe people on OpenBazaar might be able to implement this, if even necessary. Although I have to admit, I'm a little confused about what it is and how it works.
Blake Anderson, tell us what it is and how it works.
Well, my first reaction is like, well, yeah, why weren't you planning on doing this a long time ago? Like, where have you been? You work for the Nasdaq. You work in technology. You work in like payment, like just now. You're like, oh, maybe this blockchain thing that everybody's been talking about for so long is something that I can just go through the Cliff Notes version of what they said and implement myself a good old $1 billion better system here. I don't know, that part frustrates me. But aside from that, let's focus on the positive that I think that what's going to happen is eventually if they use the fundamental blockchain technology and not just a side chain, and I think that there will be reasons that will eventually drive them into interacting with Bitcoin, people that are investing in technology in the Nasdaq and things like that are going to be like, oh, we have this inflationary stock market that's based upon future gains and companies can be badly managed overnight and stuff like that. Let's go into the new mathematically provable digital scarcity that's available through this different thing, and I think it's going to be a Chinese finger puppet or finger trap where they put their fingers in both ends and like, we didn't really like that, and hopefully he had a reason for avoiding it for so long, and hopefully now that he thinks that it's safe to jump in, he's wrong, and the Leviathan eats the Nasdaq. Is what I'm hoping happens here. So,
Theo Goodman.
I think it's really cool that they're experimenting with this stuff. I do believe they're still using the word experimenting, and you have to realize that these are exchanges. It's a competition. It's a market of markets competing against each other, and that is a big motivation. Because now everybody, when you think of what stock exchange is using blockchain things, Nasdaq. They want to be associated with that technology. Now, whether they're really able to do it and if it works and what they're doing and all that, well, that's secondary. First of all, what's important is they get media attention, that they're doing cool stuff that's high tech related to Bitcoin. And they get attention because it's Nasdaq against New York Stock Exchange, against Deutsche Börse, against all these exchanges. They compete for relevance, and there also are mergers within these exchanges. Sometimes they say, okay, should we buy them out and all this kind of stuff. Just like there are also companies. So I think it has a lot to do with that. That's my opinion, and I think it's really cool what they're doing, what we know so far about what they're doing, and let's see how this develops.
Theo's right. In the near future, I hope to buy all of my drugs on the Silk Nasdaq. Will Pangman.
Well, I'm surprised nobody mentioned this, but I think the most important thing about this whole story is even though the mainstream publications or financial press, whoever's covering this, including CoinDesk, they keep referring to, Nasdaq's using blockchain technology, blockchain. They're actually using Chain.com, which is, as Thomas mentioned, it's a Bitcoin core API developer, and also Open Assets, which is another Bitcoin-based smart contracts sort of meta layer to Bitcoin's blockchain. And so all of this is not on Bitcoin technology, but actually on Bitcoin itself. And I think this would be a lot cooler. I know you wrote here, is it revolutionary, amazing, or mostly just the same? Well, if they keep calling it blockchain, it won't be revolutionary or amazing. But when they start actually being honest with everyone and saying, oh, this is Bitcoin itself, and here are the other extended technologies that we're using on Bitcoin, that will be revolutionary, that will be exciting, that will get people's heads turning.
Exit question. Which will be more successful? Nasdaq's blockchain, Overstock's Medici, or Counterparty? Derrick J.
I would have to guess Counterparty.
Ooh, Blake Anderson.
I would go with Medici, just because they got their stuff together before the Nasdaq did, and I think the Counterparty is going to morph a little bit, but I think Medici will stay around.
Theo Goodman.
I'm going to have a different answer, and that they're all going to be successful, but different successful.
Will Pangman.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Theo, and I definitely think Medici, along with Blake, will show us the way forward. They're going to learn from these experiments and tests being done by Nasdaq, and they've also already learned from Counterparty. They started with 2 Counterparty founders as part of the project. So it's clear that Patrick Byrne, he's very smart and he's got the right people on the project, it sounds like, and if he doesn't yet, he will. He's certainly got the right researchers and organizers on the project, I think. So yeah, I think Medici long term, and it will learn from the others, and they'll all have some measures of success.
The correct answer is Nasdaq. Nasdaq. Moving on to questions and answers. Our first question from Infinite Radio. why can't we test the two blockchains in a closed system? And I do think this is happening to some degree with Bitcoin XT, which Mike Hearn developed, which is, I believe, a bigger block size, which is being tested. So I think they can test it, but they can't test it to the extent they need to test it, right, Blake? Do they need like tons of hashing power to really see if this works, or is it a matter of they have to accept it? The miners have to, vote for it by mining it.
Yeah, I mean, there's several different issues, and like when Derrick was talking earlier, like why didn't Satoshi just make this variable like before? Well, if he was going to make it variable, then what you're making is just like I was talking about, like a car with gear ratios. You don't know what the gear ratios of the car should be unless you know what the car can be used for. Is it going to tow heavy shit? Is it going to do a high-speed race around a track? You need to know what the gear ratios should be for the system before you program it. So it's been programmed with a static 1 megabyte block. Did Satoshi think about this or not? I mean, there's reasons that you would want to start the car in first gear and then move along, and then possibly use that data to inform your path better. So it's can we split and do two different blocks, do a side coding to test it? The thing that we're testing is the amount of users that Bitcoin has, so that would be difficult. So I mean, yeah, it's a really really good question. If we can figure out a way to do that, that'd be righteous, but it's not immediately clear as far as how right now.
So there can be testing done, and a lot more testing in this fashion when sidechains comes out. When sidechains comes out,
does anybody have a tenable argument for sidechains yet, though? I mean, it seems like the least tenable technology I've ever heard of.
I'm with you guys on the wait and see approach for sure, but certainly that provides the laboratory.
My wait and see approach has been downgraded to like show me something that's not stupid.
I'm a little less critical. I'm a little less critical than you, but I'm certainly.
I mean, you can train a pegged asset and stuff. Like I need somebody send me some stuff about side chains that's tenable. And
this isn't about side chains. This is about those laboratories of experimentation for testing two forks and things like that. Side chains theoretically will provide this, and
yeah, it's a theoretical long-term solution, but I don't see enough progress there to put our eggs in that basket.
The main point I want to make is you can test this till your eyes turn blue. You're going to have, and you can't ever test it you can't ever fully test it for two reasons. One, you're never going to be able to replicate the network size of Bitcoin to do any reasonable testing. And two, there's that crucial point where is it live or is it a test? And how the network nodes or miners or participants in the network choose to behave in a test, in a known test, versus live. And in the case of a fork, right, you have to make a choice and then you don't look back, really. So that choice in a test environment is the factors going into that judgment are much different than in a live environment. So we're not going to know anything until until it runs live.
Very good, and Infinite Radio follows up here. Let me try to get his follow-up question in. It's loading. It's in the way. He says, it seems if we can set up a simulation of the global weather system to predict the future weather, we can set up a paper blockchain simulation to test the two blockchain variables that we're arguing about. Sounds very reasonable, but I think it is, we have to have the entire network testing.
The thing is that Bitcoin touches so many things. It touches technology, it touches economics, it touches sociology and human opinion. When you have all three of those things working together, shit starts to spiral out of control fast as far as consideration, and that's just the facts, I think.
Yeah, you can't backtest a dysfunctional family.
Very good. Moving on to the next question from Silver Miner. Any thoughts on the Coincilium IPO on the London Stock Exchange? I haven't really heard of this, so do you guys have any opinions on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that public money raising and stuff so that people can get their value out of companies that they've helped to get into by being paid with shares. Okay, I go to work for a company, I want a lot of money, I'm like a smart guy or whatever, and this company wants to pay me a lot, but they don't have a lot, but we're going to build something valuable. If the company's never IPO or go public and people have shares of that company, generally problems are created. I don't want to get too deep into that. But if we have, public offerings of Bitcoin companies starting, to say that that's a good thing is a hyper-massive understatement.
I think that Simon Dixon and the platform Bank the Future is involved in this whole thing, and I think we're going to see more IPOs based out of London and their whole project, and I think it's very interesting. So let's keep an eye out and see what happens.
I'd like to see the Coincilium IPO happen on BTCE instead of London Stock Exchange.
Wouldn't that be something? Moving on to the next question. Wouldn't Medici use the counterparty platform? And this was originally believed when they were announced. Then it was said that they were hiring some counterparty developers, but then it turned out they might have hired them away from counterparty rather than hired them to work on counterparty. So it's been a little unclear how Medici is going to be, I keep saying it wrong, going to be related to counterparty. So let's see. Back to another question. Eric says, what do you guys think of the tone of Bitcoin articles that seem to downplay Bitcoin? I'm not sure if he means Bitcoin articles from Bitcoin publications or the mainstream media, but the mainstream media seems to have a steady tone of Bitcoin is dying, Bitcoin is having a crisis, Bitcoin is falling apart type articles. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes it is falling apart.
No, all news is good news.
I had a tweet about this just the other day that more and more Bitcoin articles in the Bitcoin space are feeling like payola scandals. Like if you remember the payola scandals of, here, we'll pay you to play this song on the radio, and then, oh, lo and behold, it gets popular, and our record company makes a lot of money, and they're like, you can't do that. That's payola. Like that's what it feels like a lot of the Bitcoin publications are doing. Like, oh, like, you know, whatever Bitcoin startup or company gave me a ton of money, so I'm going to write this giant article and stuff. We're not going to disclose any of that. Like that bothers me. But that's a separate issue than the mainstream media, which is like, well, Bitcoin's not an organization that can hold us, you know, accountable for slander and libel and all that kind of stuff. So we can just say whatever we want. Whatever's going to sell the most magazines, we'll just say whatever the hell we want about Bitcoin, sell lots and lots and lots of stuff, and then who's going to come hold us accountable? Pretty much nobody, except for maybe, you know, Blake Anderson will complain about our bullshit, but like that's nobody cares about that. So.
I love the mainstream media downplaying Bitcoin. I love it every time they do it. Sow that FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I want it because the people who are reading these articles and really digesting them, who care and have a mind to learn about Bitcoin, are going to see through that stuff. I'm not interested in more players on the field who just are following the whims of the mainstream media. I'd rather they be, you know, fall in a hole somewhere. But the people who actually have a head on their shoulders are going to see through the mainstream media saying, oh, well, there's no central authority and it's not backed by governments. We're going to see that as a good thing.
And I do think Blake has a good point on the various Bitcoin publications selling articles. They might be thinking they're just giving an interview. They might be thinking we're just giving a positive piece. But if you don't put sponsored article on the article and you're paid for the article, that's not right. And it's also very questionable how and if these publications are paying their writers. I do believe the writers are experts, should be treated as experts, and should be paid as experts. I've heard stories of Bitcoin, sorry, I don't want to name anyone, but Bitcoin groups that don't pay people for articles, they don't pay people in Bitcoin, and even now there's things going around where the only value that your article has is how many times it's shared on social media. They have a very strange formula they use, and usually at the end, the company gets to keep all the money and the writers get nothing. So I'm not in favor of that at all.
Decentralize the media.
One more thing to add. I think this, to your point about journalism, is about following the golden rule. If you were someone who was reading an article, wouldn't you want to know what sort of incentive this person had writing it? I think it's just fair to be upfront about, I was paid to do this, this is the perspective I'm coming from. That's what I would expect others to do for me, and that's what I would do for them.
And just because you're writing on the internet doesn't mean that it's not journalism anymore. It's still journalism, even on the internet.
It's arguably even more journalism because you're not, you know, paid to go make some sensationalist bullshit for some company that's like, well, you know, it didn't really, you know, get as many clicks as the thing before. It's like, well, this is, you know, important news that, you know, maybe isn't so fantastic that people are going to want to look at it over like Jello wrestling, but that doesn't mean to compromise the quality of the news for that. So.
No, I disagree, Blake. If it is that important, make it interesting. Put Jello and mud wrestling in there. Do whatever it takes to get eyeballs on the important
but then you have to have the sponsored or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's a combination, I think.
Yeah.
I think also you're seeing the Bitcoin publications kind of piggyback on the trends that they see getting viral in mainstream publications. So when you see a lot of blockchain but not Bitcoin headlines, you're going to be testing those same headlines for your own, you know, the stuff that you author to try and capture some of that. I mean, again, like the subtle art of headline copywriting is basically the whole of internet virality for text content these days, which is so unfortunate. And again, there's lots of projects out there looking to improve this situation. But one being ProTip, right? Or other tipping platforms. So like, yeah, I mean, this is also, you're just seeing a piggyback effect, I think, sometimes too.
Yep. And just remotely related, Marco from Genesis Mining has been on World Crypto Network a few times talking about the block size. And guess who quoted him? The article that we talked about quoted him only about 2 months after you heard it first on World Crypto Network.
That's right. Check out World Crypto Network at worldcryptonetwork.com. We've got time for maybe one more question from Gabe. Gabe says, what's your guys' predictions and thoughts on Ethereum launching soon? It's been a while since we've talked about good old Ethereum. What do you guys think? Blake? Say something nice.
The buzz is in the air. The buzz is in the air. There's, I think there's like some third-party coin called EtherCoin or something that's had a nice little spike in value. I saw something come across the radar about that. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of products that they're building, lots of implementations. It seems somewhat disorganized. One of these days we'll have like 5 implementations all dumped on us, and who knows? We'll get to test it, and I think it's coming. I would guess, if I had to predict, I'm just going to throw this out there, but before the end of the year.
I mean, I have a background in project management, and just like Will said, like the scope bloat here as far as like all this implementations and stuff, like going out laterally instead of going towards the finish line. Like I'm like, I hope you guys can release. I mean, I'm trying to be as positive as I can. I just am like, like focus it in.
I just wanted to say, am I muted? Damn it. Can you hear me?
No,
yes.
No, you weren't muted.
Okay, sorry. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I just wanted to say I heard a rumor that whenever it is launched, and let's hope it is launched at some point when they're ready, that when that happens, then this whole thing about using the Serpent code, which is the code that is the scripting language of Ethereum, well, then the counterparty guys, remember when they came out and said, hey, we can do Ethereum on the Bitcoin blockchain, ha ha ha. Yeah, well, what's happening is they're kind of waiting for Ethereum to launch so they know what the standards are for that script and all this other stuff, so that the worlds can kind of interlink somehow. I don't know how that's going to work.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people
waiting.
Right, there's a lot of people waiting for this thing to finally come out. And all I've got to say is this is proving to be the most epic IPO in crypto history so far.
And remember that we need Ethereum to come out so that we can have Augur.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, Augur and all these different, like Eris Industries' entire business model, as far as I understand it, is being like, stop waiting for Ethereum, use this shit, because this is ridiculous. We need to start making progress on these projects before stuff hits the fan. So I mean, come on, Ethereum, like come on, let's get something out and have it be good. We're all excited.
Come on, Ethereum. Come on.
Thomas, you are muted.
All right.
Hey, so maybe I'm just the most patient.
Nope, you are muted again.
All right, now it's got.
Well, I'm definitely the most patient one on the panel now. And I can wait for Ethereum. I'm excited about it. There's a project that I've been waiting to work on, like about selling tickets, that I think could do a lot better than MoviePhone or Ticketmaster if we could just use a really simple application using Ethereum to sell people tickets. You could make sure that someone could transfer the tickets digitally, and you can verify that they all came from the same source. It's something that I've been waiting to do with Bitcoin, but Ethereum would make it a lot easier. And I don't have a business at stake that's draining capital, so I'm happy to wait and see what comes out of Ethereum. I'm excited about it still. So.
All right, we're running out of time, so we're moving on to predictions or story of the week. Blake Anderson, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week?
I guess my prediction is just, I try to make generalistic predictions so that I'm never, proven wrong, because I just think I'm so much cleverer than all of our audience. No, I just, my general prediction is that we're going to have a lot more talk about block size, and that we're going to need to continually remind people not to become fanatical and lose their minds. So I predict that there's going to be a little bit more tenseness over that, and that we should all keep our cool.
Theo Goodman.
Well, since I am totally prepared, as always, for Story of the Week, I'm going to make a prediction. And my crystal ball says that we will see the beginning of the week, a further drop in commodity prices, gold, silver, oil, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, the crash will begin. Now, I don't know if the real worldwide crash will begin, but I think my story of the week is the gold price. Have a look, see what's going on. This is going to get crazy either direction that it goes from this point. So I say, check it out.
Will Pangman.
I'm going to take the easy route out. I already gave a prediction. The Ethereum project, some of their software, not just testnet, will be deployed before the end of the year, I hope.
Derrick J.
I predict a bombshell announcement from rideshare companies Uber and Lyft, or just one saying, "We now accept Bitcoin."
Ooh. Silver Miner writes in, he says Bitcoin 350 by next Friday. Mark that one down. And finally, a prediction. A copy of a copy is just a copy. Some seek success by borrowing others' ideas, hiring lookalikes, and making unwatchable, low-quality videos. Others know that it just doesn't work that way. Quality comes from hard work, focusing on the details and a little magic that only the truly creative know about. There may be a million of us just like me who walk, talk, and act like me. They just might be the next best thing, but not quite me. Oh, we're out of time. Until next time, bye-bye.
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 Pushing